Well, hello.
Hey.
Hey. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. If you're listening to this and you like it, I'm going to say it again. Tell somebody about it. You guys are the reason this thing keeps growing, so keep it going. And that rhymed.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, our guest today, Kevin.
We got Justin Crevier. He's a former officer in the Marine Corps. He worked for the, Defense Department. I always forget. I think it was the Defense Department. State Department.
Yep.
That's what it was. Yeah, I worked in embassies in Azerbaijan.
He was a diplomat.
Yep. Did a lot of great work. And he talks pretty good in the depth. So today into the podcast about that.
Mm-hmm.
And right now he's a student in the physics program, double majoring. He's doing geophysics and astro emphasis, I think, as well. And pretty sweet guy.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty good talk with him. He
Yeah.
talked about some stuff that I had no idea was even going on. So
Yeah, seriously.
conflicts in the Middle East, stuff like that. It was kind of cool. So we hope you guys enjoy it. And yeah, check out our Instagram, Mission Prep Podcast. We have Facebook, we have Twitter, all that good stuff as well.
Yeah, DM us, send nudes, whatever you want.
Yeah, get on there. Let us know what's up. Say hi. We probably won't respond to you, but you can say hi anyways.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we'll respond. But yeah, that's it. So I guess we can get in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Okay then. Bye. I mean, hi.
On there, and I know people like, that guy's just playing some video game, you know?
Yeah, that's how I feel like too, because I'm like on my laptop and my video's over here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're rolling.
Cool. So we have Justin Crevier.
Crevier. That's good.
Crevier. Okay.
Is that French?
Yeah, French Canadian.
Yeah.
Nice. Is that where you were born?
New York City, but
New York?
family's mostly from. Did you ever see Last of the Mohicans?
Uh-huh.
So the French guys running around the woods with like these long stocking caps with like the Iroquois, those are my ancestors. And then some of the Iroquois and stuff, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's crazy. You know that. So, did you grow up in New York City as like through high school and everything too?
This is one of those weird things. I was born in New York City, and then we moved after maybe a couple of years. My dad was he was like an international banker, which is not like, sounds probably super glamorous, but was just a lot of being out in the office. And we lived overseas till, I came back to the States maybe 3 times before I turned 15.
Wow.
And then I came back for high school and enlisted in the Marine Corps. So, but spent that 14, 15 years in between, in Europe and the Middle East. So
Where at in Middle East and Europe? Where you at?
We lived in London. So in the early to mid 70s, we were in London, and then in the late 70s, early 80s, we moved to Egypt. We had a year in Switzerland there, sometime, and a little bit of time in Saudi Arabia. But he was getting Chase Manhattan Bank like branches started in Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and believe it or not, in Iran, because up until 1979, the revolution. Saudi Arabia, Iran, were not at each other's throats, and Iran and Israel were pretty close.
Shit, that's crazy. So how many languages have you accrued at this point then?
Well, I grew up speaking French, picked up a bit of Arabic, and then not so much after that. But then when I joined the Foreign Service, they had me go back and learn a couple of languages at what's called like the Foreign Service Institute, which I think for DoD, I don't know if it's still. They have like a language institute in Monterey, California, where you go learn like, Bulgarian or whatever. And we had the same thing for the State Department in just south of Washington, D.C., in Arlington, Virginia.
So what's that like? Like you as a kid, you're living in all these different places. How does like schooling and stuff work?
That was kind of a mess, to be honest. Like, I think we spent maybe 5 years in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved halfway through the school year, number one, which sucked. That was in like probably 4th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So I finished that year up at a French Catholic school. Oh. And then I went to the Cairo American College, which is like just a big U.S. high school or U.S. Middle and high school for like 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of screwed off a lot there, and I needed a kick in the ass. So my dad sent me to the British International School, which is like downtown Cairo, for the last year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, but you're in one place, and it's mandatory Bible study, and boys don't talk to girls. I mean, this is a long time ago, yeah, and then you go to the American system, it's completely different, and it's all about sports and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars just came out or shit like that. And then you go to the British system, which is, you ever seen like the video for that Pink Floyd song? Oh shit, Another Brick in the Wall.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was a bit like that. It was sit down, you stupid little boy, and
Mm-hmm.
shut up until you're spoken to. Now that works until the kids get as big as the teachers, and then the kids are like,
Yeah.
sick it. But
So was there other American kids and stuff where you were going?
yeah, mostly. Yeah.
So kind of you guys had some similar things going on in life then.
Yeah.
This was kind of segregated then.
I can't even imagine. I mean, growing up here my whole life, I can't even imagine being all over the world as a child.
It had a lot of pros and cons, but the pros you realize later down the line. You get maybe a better perspective on things and stuff. Cons could be, some of it you were a lot more on the edge than you realized, I guess. Like I was trying to think, when did I first get into sort of astronomy and planetary science and all that? When did that really first interest me? And I realized when I was in fifth grade, I missed about a third of the school year because I had typhoid. It was either typhoid or it was amoebic dysentery. Now that's kill your ass disease. That isn't, I feel bad, I'm not going to school this week.
Yeah.
And this is 1977, 78. We're in Egypt. They're not going to fly me anywhere because I'm possibly infectious. So you're laying in bed all day, and my dad or my brother or somebody brought me a bunch of books from the library because they were doing stars and planets.
Mm-hmm.
So it was reading about that got my mind off the fact, even though I'm just a fifth grader, you realize, I'm potentially kind of screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you have things like that, and you don't really realize how weird that is compared to most people's lives until later.
Yeah. Yeah. You have nothing to compare it to.
Yeah.
Seriously. No. So something I didn't know that you kind of mentioned it earlier. You were actually enlisted in the Marines before you went commissioned.
Yeah. So my dad, we were still living in Egypt. My dad wanted us to get onto a better track to go to U.S. colleges because the British system's kind of different and stuff.
Okay.
So we wound up going to, I don't know if you guys, this is really an East Coast thing. You know what prep schools are?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah, like Exeter and Andover. Like my brother went to Exeter, and I went to one that was like almost as good. And believe me, we couldn't afford this level of it. A lot of it was like a benefit that my dad had. So I went to one of those. I went to prep school. I skipped 9th grade going into prep school.
Mm-hmm.
So I was up to my eyeballs in just trying to handle all the workload. And this is my first time really being around like American sports. Because at the American school in Egypt, you had wrestling and basketball, but you didn't really have like football.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make like JV football as a, 160-pound kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably hard to relate with the other kids because they know all that stuff and you have no reference of it. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah. And well, those kind of schools are feeder schools for the Ivy League. They're a bit different now. I think they've tried to broaden their base so it's not just a bunch of like rich kids, but
right.
There's usually one kid every year though who kind of says screw it and enlists. And in my case, like I didn't do really well in high school at all. And I think I read, I don't know if you guys know who James Webb is.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I read one of the books he'd written. I think it was probably Fields of Fire about Vietnam. And remember, Vietnam was 10 years ago at this point, 8 years ago that we pulled out. And I read this, and I'm like, I don't want to be like most of the kids I'm in high school with. I want to be more like these guys. And yeah, that's a kind of a romanticized view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and so I enlisted the Marine Corps, and I enlisted under something called, I'm sure the Army has, you were in the Army too?
I wasn't. I'm not a veteran.
Okay. I just, cause I think the codes are the same and all that. You go in and you're like mine was guaranteed like combat arms,
Okay.
which was what a lot of the young guys with maybe not so much planning skills kind of go into. And so I went in the infantry, and I it was a 4-year kind of growing up and normalizing a lot with the U.S., where you can.
Yeah, no, the Army is pretty much the same. I don't want to disrespect our mortarmen out there or anything. But like when you go in as an infantryman in the Army, you get the 30th AG at Fort Benning, and when they call your roster to go to like get your company, every time like it happened, which is funny because I was in 30th AG for 2 fucking weeks because they had too many people in there at one time. Oh, yeah. And when they called the roster that I was supposed to be on initially for that first week to go out, they're like, "Yep, you guys are all mortarmen now," and I just saw a whole room of guys just get depressed. Because you sign for more. You sign for infantry, and then they'll make you mortarmen or line guys, right? And so at that point, I was like, well, this was now worth having to stay here for another fucking week. Not to be a mortarman.
Yeah.
I love some of my best friends are mortarmen, especially Mario Ybarra, but I didn't want to be one. But yeah, so yeah, pretty much the same thing as going like Marines. Yeah, kind of,
It's a culture shock. I mean, it really is. But I think, kind of going back to what you guys are bringing up, like one thing I never had growing up was you get a lot of experiences, like when you're growing up in one place, maybe that kind of builds you up and that cement where you think you sit with different people or different groups of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I never really had that.
Yeah.
So there's a certain kind of confidence that I think I never really got. But on the other hand, I've always been able to talk to or deal with really broad, really different groups of people.
I could imagine, because you've been around so many different
people. But I don't have I've never had the conviction that a lot of people have.
Yeah.
I know for sure this is right.
Mm-hmm.
That comes, I think, from having, in a lot of ways, from having been in one place and had a set of experiences that reinforce that point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing, I think, from my end, not having that. But
when you joined the Marines, was there anything going on at the time when you joined? Because you said Vietnam had wrapped up before that.
No, it was 1985. I was 17. My dad was like, "No, don't go in the Marine Corps," because he wanted me to go to college. He's like, "Here, I'll pay for you to go to Europe on a backpacking trip this summer, and and all this and." Because I'd gotten into a couple of state universities, which is fine with me, but he wanted me to do more or whatever. And the Marine Corps was kind of still in its Vietnam hangover, I guess is a good way to put it. And they had just, I wound up being our school of infantry where, you go and learn how to be a machine gunner or whatever, was the same place called Camp Geiger in North Carolina, that the unit that had just been hit in the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut was based out of. We only had 24 infantry battalions. And most of those on the west coast of Hawaii. But this one, so you'd have all these E2, E3s, Lance Corporals, PFCs with 3 rows of ribbons and combat action stuff and all that, who just had these horrible attitudes, as you could imagine, because they just went through some really dirty shit that nothing really ever got done about.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the NCOs and staff NCOs were Vietnam veterans.
Okay.
And if you've ever seen, I use movies a lot because I think it's an easy common ground for it, but have you ever seen the movie Full Metal Jacket?
Oh, yeah.
So the guys are on patrol, second half of the movie in Da Nang or whatever. And I looked at them and I said, holy shit, all that gear they're wearing is all the gear we wore when I went in. Not boot camp, we had to jump, but my first assignment is a PFC, Lance Corporal, whatever. Those old helmets with the cork liner, and then the flak jackets, it's got those thin little plates. And then on top it's paper mache or something. M16A1s. I was a machine gunner, but it was the M60 without. It was one version older than what Rambo uses in the Rambo movie.
Okay, yeah.
It was literally the Vietnam era one. And we always had crazy personnel shortages. There was one point where I think I had to go. I was the only guy there in the machine gun section, and the TO is 6 M60s and barrel bags and all that. I had to check all this shit out from the armory and spend all day cleaning it, but that's kind of where we were though.
Yeah.
And then they made a huge turnaround.
Yeah. My dad was in the Marine Corps towards the tail end of Vietnam.
Oh yeah.
He's in his mid to late 60s now.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, I don't think he ever went to Vietnam. And if he has, he doesn't really say much about it.
He graduated same year my dad did, 72.
Yeah.
So after 72, I think they were really pulling back.
Because I know he's talked about the time he was stationed in Hawaii, and he said, he's like, you know, it was real rough. I was pretty much paid to be a lifeguard. Yeah. But I know he was he has his sniper.
He was sniper qualified
and all that, which I don't know how much that really means. But as far as I know, he didn't end up going to Vietnam. I know for sure Hawaii. Yeah. And it was probably the tail end of Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And I think he was only in for, you know, the minimum amount, probably 4 years. From what I understand, he got in some trouble when he was 17 or 18 and kind of had a choice to make whether to join or get locked up or something. And so he joined. And so he was tail end of Vietnam. But he's still, I mean, I don't know how many years ago that was, but he's still very proud that he was in the Marine Corps.
They've never made it easy to be a sniper anywhere. So whether he was in Vietnam or not, he kicked ass given what he was given. I'm sure.
From what I understand, he was a badass back in his day. But it's one of those things with him. For years, he didn't really talk about his military service at all, and I would have never even thought of him being in the military. And then as he got a little older, and he kind of started to kind of show more pride about it. And he has a hat that says, you know, Marines. And it's cool to see that he's prideful of it. But for years, it's like it was never even mentioned, which I get that too. I mean, not everybody wants to talk about the stuff they've done in their life. But, and he didn't even fill out his VA paperwork for years and years and years. And he finally did. And it was a perfect timing thing. He ended up getting cancer right after everything was ready. Paperwork was filed, so the VA has taken care of him for the past, I'm trying to think how many years it's been. But he had kidney cancer, and they had to remove his kidney, and they got all the cancer out, and then heart issues after that and all that. But the VA's been amazing for him. They really have. Yeah, I know they sent him to Seattle. Yeah, it was Seattle, the VA over there for a surgery, and it's cool. Have you heard of the Fisher houses? Do you know what those are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where they put the families up. Yeah. Yep. So my mom. Going on a tangent here about it, but it was kind of an emergency thing straight to Seattle when he went, and my mom went too, and I was worrying like, where the hell's my mom going to stay? She can't sit in the hospital all night. And so I booked a flight and flew to Seattle to be there with her, and turns out there's this Fisher house that's right next to the hospital, and it was a beautiful place. I mean, they let him do laundry, and there's a kitchen and nice rooms, and I stayed there I think 2 nights with my mom, make sure everything was good with her, she's safe, and then I went back home. But it's kind of cool that they do that, the Fisher House thing.
No, they try to help out. And and there's a lot of people that, you know, I guess go unmentioned, you know, that are really wealthy, that donate a lot to the hospitals, veterans causes, you know.
There's some celebrity that's involved with the Fisher House. I'm trying to remember who it is. Huh. I want to say like Denzel Washington.
It could be. He's a legit guy.
I think, I can't remember, but somebody is associated, and they've donated a ton of money to that.
Yeah.
But it's cool what they do for families. I don't think we have one here that I know of. But
probably not.
I know they have them all over the country, but it's really cool that they do that for the families.
Yeah.
I guess they maybe put them at hubs. So, you know, because Idaho's supposed to have the VA here. I've never been, but it's got a great reputation for what I've heard from people. But it may just not be big enough to have, you know.
Yeah, because Seattle's much bigger.
Yeah. No, the VA here is, I mean, they just expanded the parking garage, made a parking garage and stuff, and they built. I mean, because a lot of veterans are coming here. Like every day I meet someone who's from, you know, like San Diego, you know, who's a Marine or something like that. Like a lot of vets are really coming here because it is a good VA, and the VA is trying to compensate for that. I think they're growing, and I mean, right now it's not easy. Like I called in June for an appointment, and now it's in December 11th. So 6 months to get into my appointment.
Well, I've heard a lot of vets complain about the way the VA works.
And another complaint I have, which people don't bring it up enough, is that, I mean, it's you know, if you want to know what socialist healthcare looks like, your primary doctor is a resident. They are not a subject matter at this point. They are a general practitioner who is a resident. So if you say, like, all my symptoms that I was having, I listed off a whole lot. She says, okay, this is in June. Come in September, I'll test your thyroid. I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I went and saw my civilian doctor, and I told him what she said, and he just laughed. He's like, yeah, they're residents. They just don't have any experience yet. He's like, because the symptoms I read him off are completely different. He says, oh, you have blast injuries, you need to be on TRT, you need an SSRI just to get you that boost and then get off of that. But he's like, you have a testosterone deficiency, your hormones are off. Here's what it looks like in your brain right now. And I will test your thyroid just because, and it was fine. You know, like, but after everything I told her to be like, yeah, I'll test your thyroid September. I think don't, everything else, it's fine, you know? So that is upsetting too. So the VA, I'm glad that now you can go outside of the VA to get help.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can use that to go get, you know, somebody outside who's an experienced doctor.
Well, I guess the VA here, from what I heard through my dad, was they had a COVID outbreak here recently. Yeah. So there's either people who are saying, screw that, I'm not going to the VA, or they're not allowing like non-elective stuff or elective stuff and things like that. But because my dad, he's on dialysis, but he doesn't go to the VA for that. He goes to a clinic for that. Mm-hmm. But he still has appointments within the VA that he hasn't been going to because something to do with COVID.
Yeah, no, they're really tight about it, which is good. You know, I get it. But I mean, we're all going to get it. I think I did get it in February because I was actually looking up some like side effects, and people saying, yeah, one of them is like if you have like pain in your chest when you're trying to be active for a few weeks after. Because in February, I had the cold for like 3 or 4 days, like 3 days. It really was. It was kind of bad, but for the next 6 to 8 weeks, every time I warmed up in my garage to work out, my chest hurt, my lungs hurt. I was like, and they hadn't felt that way since I was like 8 or 9 when I had pneumonia. And so I never get that from a cold or a flu. So I think I did get it in February because I've read a lot now about people saying that's an after effect, is that chest pain when trying to do something physical active for a while. Sorry, lung pain, not chest pain. So I think I did have it.
It's hard to tell though, because I know so many people who say that they think they had it, and most of them probably haven't. Maybe they have, including myself. I think my whole family had it back in March or April, I think it was. But I mean, you can go get the antibody tests, but now they don't know how long the antibodies last.
Yeah, maybe 6 months. Yeah,
it's a whole crazy thing. And I know a lot of people have had COVID, tested positive, and it's all different symptoms, different.
Some people don't even know they have
different recovery time. Some with no symptoms.
Yeah, who was it? It was someone at the gym Bria was just telling me about. She played soccer at BSU, and I guess she had it, and so did like a third of the soccer team, and no one even knew they had it. I mean, they're young, they're outside, they're playing soccer.
Too. Yeah, they're young, they're healthy. They probably got their aerobic system could probably shrug half of it off.
I guess no one even knew they had it, and they all tested positive.
That's been happening in college football a lot recently. There's a lot of teams that have, including BSU, their starting quarterback tested positive, and from what I hear, he had no symptoms, but they couldn't let him play, obviously.
Right.
And it's a weird thing. I know a lot of people, most people I know have had it are within the post office, which, I mean, that's another thing. Like, I was having this conversation with my wife. I'm in and out of these post offices all day, seeing people, multiple people. I'm like, I don't know how I have not been exposed to it, because I've been working through this whole thing. But I've been, other than the time back in March or April, I've been very healthy, and I take all the precautions necessary. I'm use my common sense and try to do the best I can, but I'm around people, and I also share trucks with people at work, and it's, as far as I know, we haven't had any drivers who've come down with it, which is amazing. We have over 50 guys just out of our Boise branch, but I don't know how I haven't at least been exposed to it. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's where I've been kind of fortunate, maybe for Justin too, since like we're both retired. I was medically retired. I mean, so we both, at the end of the day, it's like if we had to leave our jobs, if we had jobs, it'd be okay, because at least we have that to, look, we still have our retirements, unless the government takes that at some point too. Like, I
feel so bad for people who, like, small businesses that have had to shut down.
I just read $200 billion loss in small businesses, while other, Amazon, Walmart all grew. Mm-hmm. $200 billion loss.
Yeah.
And it's like, I like that meme. I read a while back, like, if you have someone in your household you need to support or feed, your job is essential.
Yeah.
Well, seriously.
I get everybody trying to be safe and shut stuff down, but it's like these people's businesses who they didn't do anything wrong they're going to lose their business. It just makes me feel sad for them. But I don't know. I think we'll get through it. I've said that from the beginning. People are resilient. We'll get through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What this is doing, I think, is it's moving it's splitting the middle class more. You
Mm-hmm.
know, where you used to be able to maybe work your way up there and
Mm-hmm.
stay there, and now, yeah, the Amazons and the Walmarts and they're doing better because what they do is what people are, you know, what people are demanding or paying for, or whatever. But then a lot of the mom and pops, yeah, they just can't stay afloat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that happens a lot with sort of like gig workers and stuff like that too,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
Yeah.
it really, I think they're going to, 10 years from now, they're going to write their first history of this, and they're going to figure out there's a lot of weird shit that we just didn't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure in 1918 it was the same thing, you know?
Yeah.
It wasn't like people said, oh, it's coming through Philadelphia. It was like, oh, crap, here we go again. Or,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
why is grandma sick and our 2-year-old?
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to find out that there were different strains and they had different physiologies,
I think you're
different
right.
ways. And, you know.
Yeah. It's a weird thing. It's a weird time. I mean, for everybody. And it also has divided the country more and more with whether people want to wear a mask or don't want to wear a
It
mask.
became a political thing versus thinking about the best thing to do.
Yeah. And just try and keep everybody safe, which I don't know. It's like, I'm one of those people. Like if someone's hardcore, want to wear a mask all the time, go for it. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I also, like, I guess I am kind of judgy. I'll see somebody in a store without a mask. I'm like, what are you doing?
Well, like the
You
time,
dick.
Yeah, when they're righted the other day with the kids, and I was like, Vivian they both wanted to wear them because they have them from their mom got them some, and they're really cool, like, you know, Power Rangers or whatever, and so they want to wear them. I was like, if you don't want to, you don't have to. If it makes you scared or uncomfortable. So my son, he's just turned 3 a couple days ago, but he was 2 at the time, right? And he walks in, he wants to put it on. I was like, all right, I'll put it on for you. So I'm putting it on him as we walk in, and I look up, and there's this guy who actually looks like a veteran, though he's dressed with a shitty beard. And he's looking right at me, shaking his fucking head like I'm a piece of shit.
For putting a mask on your child.
Yeah.
That's,
And he's not wearing one, obviously. And I'm like, dude, I get you have an opinion, but don't push that on me or try to judge me, you know? Because actually, like, I actually didn't even care if he really would wear it or not because his age, but he wanted to wear it. Like, dude, like, I was so mad about it. I wasn't going to, like, start, you know, I'm a classy bitch, you know? I'm not going to start anything in front of my kids and I'm not white trash, you know? I was like, man, if they weren't here, I would just let that guy have it. You know? Like,
I just don't get how something that's involving like public health can divide people so much.
exactly.
And that's with everything. This whole year has been insane with division and stuff like that. But I also don't think it's as divided as people think.
Right.
People can get along.
No, I think there's a lot to be. There are groups of people or whatever that stand to make a lot to benefit. I shouldn't say money, but to benefit a lot when they see when there are Americans out in the streets paintballing each other or screaming at each other. Whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's Putin. That's, for that matter, not the media is doing this. I think we blame too much on the media, but they certainly benefit.
Oh,
yeah.
They get more people, you know, they get more eyeballs on their website. They get more ad revenue and all that by all this division. And there are other groups of people who generally benefit from inducing this kind of chaos.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we all lose.
Yeah.
Really.
That's
you know?
Yeah, we give into it. Because if China and Russia really are promoting this in any way, if they're helping at all, like I couldn't say I know of any proof. Like I heard Alex Jones say it, right?
that's a reliable reason.
Like China and Russia, you know, want this to happen, so they're in a way instigating it to help divide us more, make us a weak country. You know, so that's kind of what he was saying. And I was like, it makes sense. I can't say that's absolutely true. What do I know? You know, but
yeah, I don't know. It's a crazy time.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll circle back. So after the Marine Corps, how long were you in the Marines?
So I was enlisted for 4 years, but my 4th year I was at another prep school, the Naval Academy Prep School. I got a nomination to go there. So, which I think they take, each of the service academies takes maybe 10, 20, 30 enlisted people a year, maybe more now. I don't know, maybe less. So most of the Navy guys who went like Navy nuclear power because they already had a huge amount of math. Ooh. And then the Marine Corps was like, you know, an aviation ordnance guy, a couple of infantry guys, and kind of an eclectic group. So a year of that, and then 4 years at Annapolis, and then got commissioned. And it was, you know, that's another kind of those weird experiences you get because you've got what's on the surface. Everybody sees the midshipmen drilling and all that, and I guess it looks cool in lots of pomp and circumstance, but you come in there as an enlisted guy. One thing I always said in my 4 years there was we need more staff NCOs because if I'm an 18, 19, 20-year-old like freshman and it's the freshman juniors, it's the people 2 years ahead, it's their job to shit on you all year. And they do it. And a lot of it's stupid. Like you run out on the corner before lunch every day on the corner of the hallway and you have to recite, you now have 10 minutes till noon meal formation. The uniform for noon meal formation is blah, blah, blah. The officer of the day is, the assistant officer of the day is. And then you got to go through the menu, tossed green salad, assorted dressing packages, all that silly shit, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have to say, you got to recite a bunch of shit, right? Meanwhile, you got these guys coming up and they're in their face and they're yelling at you. And was it assorted dressing packages or blue cheese dressing? on one level, it's fucking ridiculous. And I mean, I'll on the other, it's not about learning what the dressing packages are. It's about memorizing something and being able to execute it when people are in your face and trying to divert you from stuff and all that. Like another thing they do in your plebe year, they put you in this thing called USS Buttercup. It's just a stupid name, but it's a space about twice this big, and it's a damage control simulator. But it's like got a bunch of pipes like the inside of a ship, and they can control when these things burst. So it's you and two other guys, and it's teamwork. And you're running around with all these different things trying to fix pipes or close valves, and then maybe the porthole bursts in or whatever. And meanwhile, the water level's going up and up and up. And if you don't have your shit together, right, after about 10 minutes, you're like,
oh, man. And
then they let you out, and you feel like an ass because everybody else is watching you through the little window inside.
Yeah.
That's what standing on the corner reciting the stupid noon meal menu is getting you ready for.
Okay.
I mean, it was annoying, and I hated probably most of my time there, to the point that I don't feel that I used maybe all the opportunities as well as I should have. Mm-hmm. But, it's there for a specific purpose, and it churns out certain kinds of people, and the top 10% of what it produces are incredible, I think I mentioned Chris Cassidy, the guy, the astronaut who just came back down from the space station. This guy was, he went into the SEALs. He did his first 4 or 5 years as a SEAL. Then September 11th happened. He was running on Tora Bora trying to flush these guys out. Went out and got his master's in math, and got picked up for the astronaut program. And now he's the head of the astronaut office. He's had, I think, 4, what are they called? Where you go up and you're in the International Space Station for months and months and months and all that. So, and he's commanded the last couple times. He was the guy who, when an Italian astronaut went out on outside the station on an EVA, his suit started to leak. And it's my understanding the guy got a little bit freaked out. So Chris had to kind of throw all his shit on, get out there and drag the guy back in. So it produces people like that.
Yeah.
It produces a lot of just normal, decent people too. Produces some real egotistical assholes, as you might imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they're ass kickers.
I have a question. Never being in the military, what's it mean to get commissioned?
I'm sorry, that's to become an officer, like a second lieutenant or ensign. So the Army may be different, and I'm sorry if I'm off on this, but the like E1 through E3 is pretty much you go in at one of those ranks. And that's like your sort of trainee level almost. Like I went in as a 17-year-old E1. I was the absolute bottom of the pile. But if you've got a little bit of college or something, you go in as maybe D2 or E3, or you're in a specialized program, then non-commissioned officers are E4s and E5s. And then staff non-commissioned officers are like above that. And they're pretty much career people and that. And then commissioned officers are the guys and gals who become like lieutenants or ensigns.
Gotcha.
Typically they got a college degree, not always, and then they become like captains and majors and commanders and all that stuff. So.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you go in the Army with a college degree, not going down the officer route, officer candidate school or anything, you come in as an E4 off the bat, which was weird and basic because you had guys who were E4s, going in there and they're like, yeah, I have a college degree. And I get that now because at that time I would be like, why don't you just become an officer? But I get, because I'm also that person. Like, even with the degree, I want to go in and be with the dudes first. be on the line, be with the guys. Because I can see how that has a lot more benefits at times than being an officer. Maybe get that time under you, and then you can appreciate how to be a good leader as an officer, I would imagine. Like, obviously, Yeah.
That bottle of water is for you, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
If you get thirsty. I always forget to tell our guests that they have a drink right there in front of them.
It's been the same one every time because nobody's ever opened it. Yeah.
So, did you get your MBA during or after you were after your commission?
I left active duty, so I resigned my commission at about the 12-year mark, I guess, counting my enlisted time.
Okay.
Because it was the late 90s. Things were real quiet. I'd gone in, even to get to Bosnia, took kind of stretching things because it was mostly reserve units that were going there.
Okay.
And so you're sitting in the States and, you're doing stateside stuff, which is mostly getting ready for if there's ever a war, but it gets a bit repetitive, and there are certain kind of personalities that love that. And there are others that are like, I can't do this for long. So I went out and I got my MBA at the University of Washington over in Seattle, and got called up because we had September 11th kind of. We just gone and done ultra focus lens in the reserves, which is the Korean War exercise that happens every year. So we had come back from that, and it was like September 10th or something, and I was a reservist then, so I was in grad school full time, but then like in the summers I do reserve stuff, and we're literally like cleaning off our gear to turn it in. And we see this stuff happening in September 11th. And then they said, come back over to the G2. You guys are on 9-month orders and you're not going anywhere. And I mean, we weren't complaining. We were getting calls, probably a couple dozen people a day who were like, hey, I just got out, or I'm an inactive reserve guy. How can I get back in? Because you can imagine people were pissed.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, that's who you have. Our whole generation of guys that joined was because of September 11th.
Yeah, we joined in like 2000. Well, like our friends up 2007.
Yeah,
that's when we all joined up. So it was just a few years after.
It was crazy. I've talked about this before, but we had a bunch of our friends all joined. I'm one of the only guys that didn't, and I've mentioned this before that I regret that. I kind of wish I would have, just to provide a service for the country and stuff like that. But it's crazy. Almost everybody that joined got out pretty quick. We have two friends that are still in, I think.
Yeah, Andrew's the one I forced to go in with me. He was in college at BSU.
And he's still in.
And he's the one that's still in. He's not gonna I forced him to go with me, and he's the one that's still in.
He's a recruiter now.
And then Luke hated it. Yeah. After he was out, he's like, fuck the Army.
He got out and went back in.
And then and then realizes that life out here kind of sucks. He's like, man, fuck this. So now he's a Green Beret now.
Green Beret now.
Yeah. So now I think everybody else is out.
And then we had another friend who was a Marine also, and he had a real rough deployment from what I heard, his final deployment. And he was pretty messed up for a long time. From what I've heard, he's doing very well now. I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, but he had a rough time transitioning out of the military when he got out.
Yeah.
And I've seen all my friends kind of go through that transition, and some do it more seamless than others, but everybody finds their way through it somehow or another.
Yeah.
It's kind of.
So what were you doing? I vaguely know between like the Marines and starting the physics program at BSU. I know you were in Azerbaijan, right?
Yeah. So I went into the, it's called the State Department, but if I say that here, Idaho has a State Department, so it sounds like it's land management or something, but it's the thing that Pompeo is in charge of now. It's the diplomatic corps. So we go and we staff all the embassies all over the world, and we handle foreign policy and diplomacy. I mean, based on what the president wants and what Congress tells us to do. We don't go making shit up doing what we want.
Oh, okay.
And the application process for that is pretty wide open. You don't even need a college degree technically, although everybody I knew who was a foreign service officer had one. But you take a written exam, a small percentage get asked to come and do like a day of oral interviews and assessments and stuff. And that's mostly like, are you objective? Can you work in a team? That kind of stuff. And then at that point, they do your background check for top secret and your medical and all that. And then if a space opens up, then they take you in and you become a foreign service officer, and you're working mostly in embassies for the next 20, 30 years.
Wow.
There's the federal retirement system's real Byzantine, and I found myself at age 50 having 30 years of federal time, which is where like you peak, like you get, I don't know what it is, a certain percentage of your salary gets added every year of service you have.
Right.
And then you peak, and then after that, it's only like a smaller amount. And I looked at that, and I looked at a lot of other things, but the number one thing for me, no question, was I want my kids to be in the U.S. for high school. I want them to have, they may not get the same, like, level of education as they would going to some, high-end international school, whatever. Who cares? I want them to be in the United States, go to American high school, get educated here, and at least have some roots and some stability.
Yeah.
And be able to draw and stuff.
How many kids do you have?
2. They're both boys. They're 9th and 10th grade they're at Eagle High now.
Okay.
So, well, kind of at Eagle High.
I was going to say, probably. Yeah, that's a weird path to navigate with the online school. I have 2 children in school as well, and my little one, kindergarten, they're going full time, and his school is literally right here in the neighborhood.
Oh, that's great.
Which is amazing. I mean, we walk in 5 minute walk. My older son, it would have been his first year of middle school, and we decided early on, because he did really well with online last year when they went to online. So we talked to him, said, do you want to do online or do you want to go? Because we had a feeling it would be back and forth. And so we decided to keep him online. It's been working fine. I mean, they don't get the attention that they get if they're there in person. And I think for some kids, it's harder to learn that way. But he's doing all right. We're making it work. My wife has pretty much become a teacher, and she actually left her job to do just that. And she also, she enrolled in school as well, but she's helping him. She's pretty much his homeschool teacher now, but it's kind of a weird path to navigate with what's going on with schools.
No, definitely.
How old are yours, Kevin?
My son just turned 3. My daughter's 7.5. Okay. So she's in 2nd grade, and it's changed. Like, I feel like every week at this point. She was going 2 days a week in person, then doing 2 online. Then she was going 4 days in person, 1 online, and now she's back to 3 online, 2 in person. And the ones that are online, now it's like scattered throughout the day at weird times. And man, she goes to a charter school, so it's still better. I mean, there's only 15 kids in those classes versus like 34, 35, 36, So she still has the upper hand there. But I feel, and I want to be able to put in more, especially considering like I'm an upper division physics student. Like I have a lot to offer, you know what I mean, in math and writing. Like I'm not a below average intelligence person, is what I'm saying. Like, but with the time management is what's killing me with doing that. I want to help her more, but between my classes and what's expected of us to get done every day, attending the Zooms and then the homework and then studying for the exams, it's like, it's hard to do all that, maintain a house and a healthy relationship with everybody in the house. And, because I think throughout the COVID thing, we forgot to take care of ourselves, like in our house, like to get out more. It became like business. It became like, we have homework to do. We got to make sure the kids are having fun, but we forgot to do things for ourselves, So yeah, it's been kind of a rough few months, COVID, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's throwing a wrench in the gears for everybody.
Yeah, dude. No.
I feel like some of it's going to stay this way, though. Not necessarily because of COVID. I mean, if we all took a happy pill tomorrow and COVID went away, there are, there's a certain amount of businesses that people are going to keep working from
I think
home
you're right.
and all that, and for better or for worse. I mean, I didn't realize how important it was to be able to get out and do stuff.
Yeah.
But we actually, most of my classes have been remote, but the teacher in one of them said, for volcanology, she said, because this place is like a volcanic, like wonderland. Because you have that whole, what they call the Idaho Smile. It goes all the way up to Yellowstone. I mean, this whole place was just a hellscape of volcanic activity not too long ago. But she said, look, we'll do a field trip out there and see some of this stuff and get our hands on it. You've all got to socially distance. You've got to obey all these rules. It's a BSU official trip. But man, I was like, it felt like a breath of fresh air. And it was already cold. It was only a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm like, wow, I'm like outside with other people for a focused reason, not going shopping.
Yeah.
I'm like, damn, I miss this.
Yeah.
You took it for granted, some of the small things like that. No.
What made you decide to go back to school? Like what was, because how long have you been retired?
About 3 years. Well, I think. I'm in my early 50s.
Mm-hmm.
So and people now are going to live 30, 40 years, right? I couldn't. We were lucky to have some retirement transition classes and stuff that we could go to, like for the federal government. And this sounds super corny, but one big point they made was don't retire from something, retire to something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds stupid, but it's incredibly true. If you're just saying, I mean, you knew guys in the Army, you probably knew guys, here who are like, fuck this, I'm done, I'm retiring, I'm going to go fish. And after about a month of fishing, they're like, damn, that was fun when it was how I got away from things, but I can't do that for 30 years.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like if I'm able to leave when I did, and I had maxed out my 401k and all that other stuff, if I don't have to work, then what do I want to do?
Mm-hmm.
And where can I do it reasonably well? I mean, BSU's not cheap, but it's way, way less expensive than most state universities at in-state tuition costs.
Mm-hmm.
And this way you're staying mentally active. But I mean, I barely passed Physics 2 at the Naval Academy. I was a history major, but we still had to take all the math and all the physics that you have to take here as a science major. Physics 1 and 2, Chem 1 and 2, math through Calculus 3 and differential equations.
Mm-hmm.
I did all that, and I hated every minute of it because I'm like, I'm going in the Marine Corps. I don't need to know the Laplace transform or, some other electrical shit. I just need to know how to lead Marines and all that, which is an immature attitude, but for me, that was kind of what I was thinking at the time. So I was thinking, what do I really want to do? If I could do whatever the hell I wanted, it would be going back, get an advanced degree eventually in astronomy, planetary science, something like that,
mm-hmm.
and then see where I go with it. There's no pressure to go into academia and be a professor, which is kind of cutthroat, getting a job and getting tenure. There's no pressure to go into, like, say, business or teaching or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you don't have to. You can do this just because you want to better yourself and have an understanding of the universe. When you understand what we've been getting into, the universe really is at your fingertips. Like, here's how gravity really works. 99% of people don't understand how mass really bends, what falling really is. Like, falling is not accelerating, right? The person accelerating is the person watching the person falling. Like, just, we have at our fingertips some things that seem basic, but another understanding into it. And I think that alone that's what I want to do. And it was when Haley came over, his comment. I was between 6 and 8 years old. It was in the 90s. And I had this, like, philosophical reaction to that. Like, holy shit, there's something bigger than all of us and something going on out there. It's crazy. I have to know how this works.
Yeah.
And I was obsessed with physics ever since then. It's all I wanted to do. Like, this is my childhood dream, was, doing nerd stuff, astrophysics. It wasn't being like an army sniper. That was causality. I was curious how I would be in the military, how I'd react to things. And when I got in the military, because I've always been a shy person, to make friends, just like I did in football in high school, it was by outperforming people. And by outperforming people, the causality, next thing I'm in the sniper section, right? And so, but I really lost myself at one point thinking that was me. Like, that's my ego. It's like, that's really not. That's just part of my experience in this planet, And that really, my thing is astrophysics and being a dad, like that. I love having a family. I'm not one of the guys that wants to, like, hang out and be on my own. I like family dynamic, and I like astrophysics. Dude.
Well, I think that's cool that, like, with the stuff you've done in your life, which has been quite a bit, you're still trying to learn stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think, though, people like Kevin bring something different, though, because I like the people in our classes. I like the physics students. I like the professors, but there's a stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because a lot of people in physics, they peak out in their late 20s, early 30s. And it's that kind of thing. It's incredibly difficult and incredibly intense. And there's a lot of abstract thought. And, you're dealing with 10 times something in negative 23rd of this quantity, which changes the game. And when you think about it, you're like, that's ridiculous. But it's important to have people who've got a different background and a different perspective come in as well. Because I think that they broaden things a lot. they give a different, they add a different point of view, but they also change the way that it's perceived by people.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I picked up in the State Department, which kind of surprised me, was, I mean, image is important. You don't want it to be. You want it to be about who you are and who you stand for, but you can take the best thing in the world, and if it's poorly presented, it's going to fall on its face. It's just the way it works. I mean, I wish it wasn't true, but and so a lot of it, unfortunately, is presentation skills, or being able to effectively recast something, hopefully honestly, but into, and I know what I'm saying is kind of shitty, but I mean that's where it goes.
No, it was weird, like going into like the astronomy groups and stuff like that. People like always look at me like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, he doesn't belong here. And I'd always walk in and be like, "What's up, nerds?" Like, just like, because it's it's just funny. Like, we don't all have to be like obsessed with Dungeons and Dragons to all have a common interest in something. We can all be different. I guarantee you, there's a guy out there, because the probability is high. There's someone out there who was a lineman in a college university who's probably studying physics right now, right? Like, not everybody has to fit that certain stereotype. Yeah. And I think it's kind of interesting when we walk in there as older guys and can show people that, because when they're young, they're so impressionable. You've got 20 years old, they're young, right? And they still believe what they see in movies. So they're completely thrown off by like, whoa, what the heck? Smart people don't have to be fucking non-fuckable people. Like, I don't know.
Well, I think one thing they're getting out of it though is they're looking at hopefully they're seeing people like us and saying, these guys are at a point in their lives where they can kind of do what they want. I mean, not completely, but they've got some control, and they chose to come back and study this.
Yeah,
there's got to be some value to what I'm doing here. I'm not just in this field because it's what I was good at or whatever.
Yes.
Someone said I get a job. People are fascinated by this stuff, so hopefully they're getting that.
That's exactly my approach to it. There's nothing, when I get complacent, it's because it's when I don't agree with what we're doing in class. Like, hey, at the end of the day, don't forget I'm paying your salary. Like, we are paying for this to happen. And when I feel like my money is not being well spent, sorry, not my money, the taxpayers' money is not being well spent, I'm upset. I'm upset about taking UF 100. That I can be positive about everything. I'm a pretty positive person. But I did not get anything out of that other than having to babysit a group of kids who didn't want to do a final project.
Which UF 100 did you? UF 100 is like a university foundations course.
Yes.
Okay.
So, well, you could probably explain better than me, because I didn't take it, but I just read about it.
I did the one with Dr. Jackson. So, and it was after I'd already done physics 204 and 205. And now this is like the cycles of the moon and stuff.
So it feels like you're kind of going backwards.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Because I was in there with 18 and 19-year-olds again. Yeah. Because I started my class. I was so excited to get in all these classes. I kept on pushing off classes I was supposed to do when I was a freshman and sophomore. Like, I still need to take UF 200 and visual arts. And now I'm scheduled to take both of those when I graduate. I'm taking those in senior seminar together. Oh, so I keep on pushing off like the stupid classes. So anyway, I did that like in the spring or fall or whatever. It was all young kids and looking up phases of the moon. Like, this is nuts. Like, this is crazy, man. Like, but they all thought we were there to talk about aliens because it says alien life, alien worlds. So the whole class was let down. They thought it was about aliens. That's why they're all there. But anyway, that wasn't worth the money to me. No offense to Dr. Jackson. It's just that I'm not saying I have a high intellect, but I've always studied this stuff since I was a little kid. So going back and sitting in a class doing that was just derivative of my younger self. It didn't do anything for me. And I babysit a group of kids who were not motivated to do a final project. It affected my grade. We're supposed to be getting A's in these classes, right? So the taxpayer paid money for me to sit in something that did not benefit me. I tried to find a positive. And I've had multiple classes like that, right? I mean, you got to take them to make you more well-rounded. But I think it's really about the business of the school versus how do we make somebody more intelligent and get them out there in the world working, like doing something important. How good are you like engineers? Like, I think this should be closer to a like technical school. If you want to make a good fucking engineer, they need to be practicing while they're in school. You're learning crawl, walk, run, and you should be testing on your competency. If you fail, cool. Go back a week or 2 weeks and retest you, because with the intent of, I want you to be good at this. and I want you to want to be good at this, and I want you to succeed. You want successful, intelligent, critical thinking people out there, not just a bunch of people who can memorize, take exams, and then just be still mediocre at best. And I think the school system supports that model. And that's my biggest negativity about going to school is it's difficult, but I'm also not learning fast enough. Like I'm more motivated than the pace of school is going. After 4 years, it's like, cool, I'll have touched the tip, of what I need to be knowing. That's my take on the college system right now. It's not all negative, but that's the biggest thing I take out of the negative of it. The positive is I am learning a lot. I meet new people. I like a lot of professors we've had. I like the experience itself, but
pacing can be a challenge. Yeah. Because it really, there's the math behind it all. And then there's the, how much am I motivated in this course versus that one and stuff like that. Yeah. Geoscience, I'm a double major now. I'm doing physics and geoscience.
Okay.
And I'll probably do the geoscience degree first.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different, like, sort of culture or subculture, whatever. And I almost like, I tease some of the grad students because I'm like, you're required to be, if you're a guy, you have to be from Colorado or the Midwest. You have to wear flannel. You have to wear Tevas. You have to have a dog. You've got to have like at least 2 like North Face or other like,
yes.
And for the female grad students, it's kind of similar.
Yeah.
But it's different having all these grad students around. In a way, it's like having staff NCOs around. Like the problem at the service academy is that you have 22-year-olds running things. 22-year-old midshipmen ran 85% of what went on in a day, especially for the people who are in the younger classes. And and a lot of the people who were running things were not necessarily super mature.
Mm-hmm.
For the average person to get into a service academy, and there are some incredibly talented people who go, but they've got to have been on the straight and narrow from about 7th or 8th grade. Like excelling in 2 or 3 sports,
mm-hmm.
and in one other thing, musical instrument or whatever, and then getting like pretty much straight A's in all the technical subjects and probably some APs. And then they got to get a senator or congressman nomination, and then they've got to pass all the other stuff. So there's a lot of hurdles to jump through. And frankly, the average person in high school doesn't have the opportunities
mm-hmm.
to do that. You can't go work 10, 15 hours a week at at Dairy Queen or whatever and still have the time to excel in all the baseline shit you need to get into the service academy.
Yeah.
It's a shame because they should be able to bring in normal kids.
Mm-hmm.
But because they don't, the social sort of spectrums maybe a little narrower.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you need experienced senior enlisted men and women who can sit there and provide some advice.
Yeah.
On how to lead people and how to kind of get them going in the same direction rather than just yelling at them because they forgot the range of some Soviet missile.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where things change a bit. This is a very weird analogy, maybe, but in geoscience, because you've got a lot more graduate students, because there's a graduate program at BSU, and so the directions take a bit of a different way. And physics, frankly, people are busting their ass to get through.
Yeah.
And it's a struggle just to stay afloat.
Yeah.
And physics to me feels a lot like either you're busting your ass and getting an A, or you're busting your ass and you get like a C. There's no real in between.
Yeah. You can't just half-ass your way. Because you have to use so much brain power to get through a lot of the problems you're doing, and you're in multiple classes at the same time. Yeah. This isn't just memorization, like some other, courses that are fun to take or other maybe majors. But because you have to memorize some things, like maybe some equations like, like F equals MA. But really, you have to problem solve. How can I utilize this equation to find a value to put into this one and then to put into a third one? But how to know which ones to use, you really got to think about what you're doing. So you have to use a lot of brain power. That's what I'm trying to get to, yeah.
That matters, though. A lot of people. My dad actually was I think he got his master's in physics, and this is kind of typical. He went in the Peace Corps, but then after that he went and got an MBA in the Ivy Leagues. Because if you can handle that much math, you're typically kind of well off. If you can handle that much mathematical modeling and that much abstract
mm-hmm.
stuff,
Yeah.
So it seems to be, there are a fair number of guys on like Silicon Valley or whatever who were physics, either undergrads or maybe they had a master's and then they went into finance because some of the advanced financial modeling, which I think is a bit suspect, but still you need a lot of math to be able to handle it.
I was always horrible at math. I still am. It just, my brain does not work that way. So science as well, which science not as bad because I find it interesting. Math I just don't find interesting at all.
Oh, no,
I always did really well in any language classes, English, whatever, and history because I find it interesting. But when it comes to math and science, I was always a horrible student.
Yeah, I think math, people that like math are just crazy. I only like it because it's like for me, it's a game. When I solve something that they take 3 or 4 equations to get through, I feel great. Like you just won a game or solitaire, a board game or a video game, like, because you had to work around a lot. You had to try to break down what do I want to use for this? What am I trying to solve? Where do I need to start? And then if you learn something at the end, that's awesome. Like in science in general, like it's the learning of something or seeing it. You saw it yourself and then you did the work. But just the math by itself, I know I don't like because I'm in EM theory right now. The EM theory is all fucking math, dude. It's just a textbook full of equations and you're like, cool. And you're just solving equations. And a lot of times you don't even know the context behind it. Like what are we really solving for? It's just the flux across, the surface area of the sphere, what's the, and you're doing calc 1 basically, the radius, like what's the charge here versus this radius versus outside the sphere, right? Like it's just, that's about as applicable as it gets. And so that's a pretty shitty class. But that, it reminds me that it's not really math I enjoy at all. It's what you get out of it, what you can use it for. Yeah.
I know I was talking about my older son doing online school. His first semester was math and science. I can't help him at all, which sucks. I wish I could sit there and help my son do it. My wife, on the other hand, amazing at math and science and pretty much everything. She always excelled as a student. She's in the house right now doing schoolwork. She's a student again, but he just started his second semester and it's English and PE. They have a PE online class, which is interesting, but they give him like a certain amount of exercise he's supposed to do every week. And then he's supposed to create his own exercise. It's kind of cool what he's doing, but yeah, so now I feel like, okay, I can help him. I help him a little bit because I always did well. I mean, in high school, I wrote all my friends' papers for him.
Yeah.
Everybody'd come to me and they write this paper. And it's just something I always excelled at was English and stuff, but not math or science.
No, the only thing, I guess, when it comes to like writing that I excel at, it's actually philosophy. I'm super motivated to write philosophy papers, and I did well. I was thought about just minoring in it just because. Yeah. Because I just like thinking it. It's just so intuitive for me to understand what they're talking about. Like I wrote a paper on, for like, I related to the Matrix, right? Because that's and determinism and all that stuff, and it was just really interesting to like see what I thought and then challenge that and write about that, like how I believe what kind of world we live in and why it may be different than the way I perceive it. Because perception is just, you're like, am I somebody sleeping and when I'm sleeping I'm dreaming of being a butterfly, or am I actually a butterfly in reality who's sleeping and dreaming of being a man? Like you really can't say for sure if you're in a computer simulation made by us 3,000 years from now that is so fast at computing that it is C, right? It's the speed of light. That's how fast it computes. And so that's why you can't exceed that, or else you're outside the system, right? So that's really interesting that, simulation's not, I can say here, like, I feel love, I feel pain, like my hands hurt, right? But if it's just written in the code, I don't know any better. Considering it's complex, 3,000 years in the future, compared to where we're heading exponentially, it's not out of the question, Actually, the hardest thing about believing that is that we'll survive that long, like as a race.
Well, there's nothing wrong with getting a minor in something like that, and in many ways, it's a plus. You've seen some of the speakers we've had have done things like that. Maybe they majored in physics and anthropology, or I mean, to me, the biggest problem we have with science education, and here I am, the expert, don't even have my bachelor's, but I mean, I've seen this a lot overseas. Like, one thing we consistently saw with the U.S., because as diplomats, you're dealing with the U.S.'s image overseas. You're spinning to a certain extent things that we've done, decisions that we're making, because that's your job. But which of the U.S. government, or what the U.S. is known for in terms of the federal government, this is probably a really easy question, but which one do you think is the most admired department or whatever in the world? And this isn't actually just the U.S. government, but it's all the governments around the world. There's one thing that stands out that people hold head and shoulders above the rest. Almost everywhere.
Was it education?
NASA.
Oh,
okay.
Because NASA's putting men on the moon, exploring outer space. They've done a pretty good job of keeping themselves sort of, yes, they're national, they're the United States, but they're flying the flag a little bit less and sort of advancing mankind in that. And I think the problem that we have with science is that we hide too much of it behind this big wall of equations and bullshit. And I think we've had some really good classes. We've had some amazingly good instructors. I sure as hell couldn't teach physics the way these guys do.
Yeah.
But I feel like some of the content is being lost inside some of the math.
Yep.
Because they're not looking at let's make sure you understand the difference between a fermion and a boson and why one can have certain energy states and the other one can't. They're saying, here's the math that shows that.
Yeah.
And they're not really stopping and saying, this matters because. And they don't have the time, and they have a curriculum they have to follow, and they're doing a hell of a job teaching the way they are. But if there was a little bit more time on that, I think they would attract more people.
Yeah.
And I think over time, if it was made a bit more accessible to, the public in general, like a big one that I know lights people up in the scientific community is, we found another 30 super Earths. That's what CNN says. And so now people are like, holy shit, there's like planets just waiting for us to go land on them and live. That's not what a super Earth is at all, but nobody says that. Or the scientists may say that, but in between what the scientist says and the paper they write and the science writer for CNN who's on deadline and what CNN puts up there to get your eyeballs on the page, CNN or Fox or BBC or whoever the hell you want, Al Jazeera, there's a big, big disconnect. And that's something that's easy to show the split on. Now you start talking about stuff like, how epidemics work, or, really complex, complicated shit where we don't really know everything.
Yeah.
You can imagine and if there was a way of making that more approachable and more understandable, because not everybody who's dealing with physics needs to know how to calculate, use a harmonic integral to calculate a wave function. Not everybody needs to know how to do that. I learned how, I suffered. I'll probably never use it again.
Yeah.
But it would be really cool if more people understood quantum tunneling, which is this weird phenomena, but it's what runs everything that uses a laser. Has a quantum tunneling device in it at one kind or another, and that's the kind of thing that I think people would benefit from being more aware of, but not being talked down to.
Yeah, like we talked about this a couple podcasts ago about politics, how they talk at the third grade level or whatever. What's wrong with thinking that the people that are listening can understand what you're saying? Why doesn't everybody know how the cell phone works? Why do we use gold in it? How do electrons transfer across? And, by making the gap smaller and smaller and smaller to where it's almost width of electron, right? Why don't we understand how they work? It's because I got magic in my hands. You take it for granted. It should be you can't force it, but it'd be cool if people took more interest in it.
I was going to say, I think most people just don't care.
Yeah. It's not like you're take this test on the phone before you have it, but it's just cool to know how this works. And quantum tunneling in your phone as well, right? You can say it's faith-based, but your phone fucking works. So quantum physics is real, Yeah.
I was going to ask you, how long have you lived in Idaho?
Just about 3 years.
Oh, so not too long.
No. We came here on, we'd come here about once every other year. We'd get these things called called home leave. You get a certain amount of time that you have to go back to the States.
Mhm.
Because if you're living in like, okay, we're in like Namibia. Namibia is like every positive stereotype about Africa ever. It is an amazing place to live. But maybe you want to go to vacation. Maybe you want to spend your leave for that year in like, I don't know, Kenya or the Seychelles or Mauritius, right? You don't necessarily want to come back to the States. But you do that for 15 years and you're out of touch with this country.
Mm.
Things change fast here.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to come home and realize that, because otherwise I'm not really representing. It's not my job to represent like, every single person in the country, but it is my job to understand the country that I represent.
Yeah.
And, the State Department they're doing a much better job now, but it used to be that you could go into a room full of U.S. diplomats and they were white guys from the Ivy Leagues plus Georgetown, because that's what the career attracted.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's much, much, much broader, which helps in a lot of ways too. It's one of those organizations where having a lot of diversity actually means you can do more.
Yeah.
And you can appeal to more people in more different ways. That's all about getting the job done. I know that people have very different feelings about should diversity be encouraged or forced or legislated and all that, but this organization is one where it really mattered. Okay, like an example I use is I was an economic officer in Azerbaijan, which is the southern end of the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, on the Caspian Sea. So my job was to deal with was to monitor and report on Iranian political economic activity in Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, northern Iraq, as an economic officer. But my two colleagues were, one was an Indian Muslim woman who grew up in Texas, and the other was a Cuban American guy whose dad was Russian.
Oh, wow.
So we would go to meetings with just whoever around Baku, whether it was a government ministry or the Israeli embassy or some international organization. And they'd be like, you guys are from the U.S. Embassy? Because you've got this woman who's got a female Muslim name. Mm-hmm. And then you've got a guy named, Alexei or whatever, and he speaks better Russian than all these guys who grew up in the Soviet Union. Yeah. But we were, because of the way we were, they would open up to us and talk to us a lot more.
Yeah.
And when your mission is getting information, but also being able to get the human nuances behind the information, because you're dealing with hearts and minds, that matters.
Yeah, I bet it does.
Yeah, you gotta be approachable and relatable. It can't just be like black. Like, you can't like the Men in Black walking into a place and just like tell us everything we need to know. Like, no, everybody's still human. Yeah, you gotta be able to form those bonds, those connections. And again, that's really a good point.
We would do that. I had been a peacekeeper in Bosnia when I was still in the Marine Corps. This is late 90s, and it got a bit weird. And I wound up as the operations officer for a multinational riot control unit, even though I had zero riot control experience. And this is typically like you're returning a bunch of internally displaced refugees to the town that they got chased out of. So you've got all kinds of shit show on your hands. But a lot of what I would do, this is a whole bunch of NATO people, and the unit was run by the Italian Carabinieri, who are pretty good at cracking skulls when they have to. And a lot of what I would have to do is, if there was like an American, say, colonel coming up, an Army colonel, Marine colonel, whatever, I'd pull them over and I'd say, sir, listen, they're going to want 5-10 minutes of, where are you from? Oh, I've been in New York City too, or let me tell you about my family in Tuscany. And you know what? It sounds like bullshit, but if you sit there and you open up your laptop and you start clicking on PowerPoint slides saying, situation, mission, execution, admin, logistics, they'll do it, but they're turned off.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not how their culture works.
Mm-hmm.
And culture is touchy-feely, and culture is not about putting rounds down range necessarily, but it's about putting yourself in a better position.
Yeah.
So the rounds that go down range are hitting the right place, mm-hmm. and you're not having to go take the long way and lose people.
Yep.
But a lot of it was just getting them on that same wavelength. Because I'd talk to the Italian guys too and say, hey, the Americans got 20 minutes. They'd love to hear about your family in Tuscany. They really would, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But they got 20 minutes to go through 55 slides and run off and get in their, in their Humvees and run the op. So
yeah. Wow.
A lot of it's just getting them
and trying to keep everybody happy.
Yeah.
So what's the deal with I haven't looked a whole lot into it, not as much as I should be, with the issue with like Azerbaijan and Armenia right now. Like, is it cultural difference? Is it political? Like, what's behind that?
Well, the earth cooled. No, Soviet Union was falling apart, right? 1986 was Chernobyl, which, by the way, it's a scary ass TV series, but that is a hell.
Yes,
I've heard that.
Yeah, it's a good show.
Yeah. I mean, and they didn't exaggerate too much the volunteering those guys did, which I was like, shit, I'm crying watching that. You know. So the Soviet Union was falling apart. Early 90s. There's a place. As you're looking at it, you've got Armenia, which is the first like Christian kingdom back in like 300 AD or something, and they're Orthodox. North of them, you've got Georgia. They're not really in the picture. And then west of them, you've got Azerbaijan, which is a Shia Muslim country. There's only 2 Shia Muslim countries in the world, or majority Shia, and that's Azerbaijan and Iran. But they are night and day. Even though they're neighbors, women, I don't want to turn this into like a chick hour, but women in Azerbaijan dress like women in Paris.
Oh.
It's a socially very liberal country.
Mm-hmm.
In the early 90s, so Azerbaijan, between these two countries, there's a place called Nagorno-Karabakh, and it's a Russian word and an Ottoman word. The Russian word is Nagorno, which means like in the mountains. Karabakh means the Black Garden. So it's the Black Garden in the mountains, which is kind of weird to start with. But to the Azerbaijanis, it's like their sort of ancestral birthplace. Oh. To the Armenians, it's a place where they had a lot of people settled. The Armenians underwent a genocide in 1915 at the hands of the Turks. So you get Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey.
Okay.
And the Armenians lost 1.5 million people, and it was some brutal, brutal shit.
Yeah.
Especially because that was probably like 2/3 of the population then.
Mm-hmm.
So the ones who are left are in Armenia now, but they felt entitled, to Nagorno-Karabakh as well. End of the Cold War. The Armenians and the Azeris, despite being 2 federated states in the USSR, were fighting over that spot. And for one reason or another, the Armenians wound up owning it. There have been 3 UN resolutions telling the Armenians to get out.
Oh.
Azerbaijan is an upper middle income country by world standards. So you got a massive amount of oil wealth, but 10% of their population is what's called IDPs, which is internally displaced persons, which means they were kicked out of where they lived in the 90s and had to resettle in different parts of Azerbaijan. And they've always been, they don't get treated like second-class citizens, but they have never really been allowed to, they have this special status that gives them some benefits, but also doesn't allow them to settle down somewhere.
Oh. So
they're a bit like Palestinian refugees. They don't have from the government's point of view, from the Azeri government's point of view, that's useful because you got 10% of the population is pissed off and wants to go home. And the other 90% is looking at them and feeling kind of shitty about the whole thing. So the Azeris built up, over time, they built up a massive amount of firepower. And we would go they'd have defense expos in Baku when I was there. And we would go because it was because it was our job, but it also was kind of funny because you had the Russians and the Ukrainians during the war. You had the Israelis and the Iranians. You had us and you had the Chinese. You had all these countries that are kind of at odds with each other under one big ass, expo tent.
Yeah.
And the Russians needed cubic hectares to field all the tanks they had. And the Israelis would have one booth about this size because the only thing they're selling are little black boxes. But you push the right button right and all those tanks just stop. Wow. So it was cool seeing all that. But eventually the Azeris just got sick of it and they felt that they had enough of an advantage combat wise. This was back in, there's always been fighting there.
Okay.
It's trench warfare. It's just, there's a line of trenches on the Azeri side, there's a line on the Armenian side, and they're sniping each other. And frankly, the young men who are in the trenches on both sides are not the kids of the politicians or the ministers, the business owners. They're the kids of the poor guy in the village.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting picked off. They were losing a handful a week on both sides.
Jeez.
For the last 20 years. I'm sorry, I was eyeball deep in this. It's why it's like a...
No,
it's super interesting.
That's what I wanted to know.
I think it's something like most people here in America have no idea any of that's going on.
They don't know what's going on because the Azeris have enough senior people educated in the United States to know exactly when to play this. And about a month before their elections, they launched a major offensive into Nagorno-Karabakh. And it got zero coverage in the U.S. Like, I'd have to get on BBC News to find anything about it at all. And what they did, just to make shit really complicated, the Armenians are using Russian equipment, T-72 tanks, stuff like that. Armenia as a country is so poor that their border guards and some of their soldiers are still wearing like Soviet-era uniforms or like Russian uniforms and stuff now. Azerbaijan was using a combination of Shia Muslim country, using a combination of weapons that they bought from Turkey, so a Sunni Muslim power, Israel, because Azerbaijan provides half of Israel's oil, through a deal that the older George Bush brokered in the 1990s. I know I sound like this is like QAnon stuff or something.
That's crazy.
So they're using German, Turkish, and Israeli gear mostly against the Armenian army, and I feel terrible about what happened because I knew a lot of Armenian families, a lot of Azeri families, and these are their sons. And what the Azeris were doing, you see this in like the Middle East sometimes, at the big traffic intersections, you might wait 3 minutes on a red light. So there is a giant ass LCD that's showing you ads or movie trailers or whatever while you wait in your truck or your car or whatever. What they were literally doing is they were showing drone footage of Armenian tanks getting destroyed.
Wow.
I mean, talk about propaganda.
Yeah.
Talk about taking it to it. But what the Azeris did, the reason they won, they bought these things called loitering munitions. And those are, you probably saw these in the infantry, something similar. Like infantry rifle squad used to be like, 13 guys with a bunch of rifles and maybe one semi-automatic or one, a SAW or something, or a BAR back in the day. And that was it. And it was all about being, quick and knowing your tactics and doing what your squad leader said. Now, at the squad level, often they've got these little deployable drones. So if you're wondering who's in that building, guy goes in the back, throws a drone in the air, and you look down. So these things are slightly larger than that. The Israelis and the Turks have specialized in making them. And do you know what a BM-21 is? Okay, these are like these old Russian, it's like a flatbed. And it's got a big box in the back. And they turn the whole thing and they angle it up. And it's got 20 or 30 little ports. It just launches a shitload of rockets. Yeah, so it looks just like that. But each one of those is is what's called a loitering munition. And these are these drones. And they fly up in the air. And literally, like, you go up and you start shooting at the other guy's trench line. And anywhere they fire back, you drop a drone on it. Boom, they're gone. And these things, too, like, they work against tanks because tanks have really thin armor on top of the turrets. Tanks are built to get shot at from the front or the side, right? Well, because if you put a lot of armor on top, they would turn like a semi.
Yeah.
So drones are made to go right through the top. And after 3 weeks of fighting, I think it was, the Armenians had lost over half of their tanks.
Jeez.
Which is a hellishly high number.
Yeah.
And their army was on the verge of collapse when they went in for peace talks. And the peace talks were brokered by Vladimir Putin and a guy you probably haven't heard of called Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who's the president of Turkey.
Okay.
Who's a bit of a dictator himself. And they've set things up now where for 25 years there was something called the Minsk Group. It was a U.S., Russian, and French organization where they'd run back and forth and do diplomatic stuff, and nothing would ever really happen. But at least people weren't killing each other that much on that front line. That group was completely written out of the picture. The Russians stepped in on their own with the Turks and said, "We want you guys to stop fighting now that you've kind of used up all your ammo and you're willing to stop for a bit." Because the Azeris had almost taken a key city which controls access to the rest of Nagorno-Karabakh. They'd kind of gone all the way around, which in the mountains is not an easy thing to do. But, and we're cutting off like all these civilians in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, the Armenians were reduced to, unfortunately, having to do things like cluster bombing Azeri villages that had zero military use.
Oh, wow.
So you can imagine how that was going.
Yeah.
So now there's going to be something like 10,000 Russian peacekeepers there and a bunch of Turkish troops. And that'll bring peace to the region, but it's not what anybody really wanted. Because it's going to bring Azerbaijan much closer to Russia, which nobody wants. Except the Russians.
Yeah, because they can be a proxy state for sure, because they're geographically closer. They have oil. They have, they're, just setting that up for something in the future too. Yeah, I wonder, because if they're not really, if Azerbaijan, I guess, isn't going to be satiated by it, or is it just going to continue? I would imagine, because I feel like anytime there's land, like Israel, for instance, anytime where there's land that's important to your ancestors, I feel like it just drives a war that's not going to stop. Israel and Palestine, right? Like,
do either of you ever think there'll be a time with no war? Is that, you think it's possible?
We would have to wake up from this consciousness. Like, our consciousness has to, we would need to, evolve again from where we're at now. Like, a consciousness evolved last time, right? A couple times. Originally from, let's just be hypothetical here, sorry. But, if we were apes coming down from the trees and eating mushrooms, it was opening parts of our brains because of the psychedelic response. Next thing we left the trees, and then we're more out in the sun, start losing our hair, right? Because we get more UV rays, and our brain evolves. Like, I imagine it's happened twice since then, right? Humanoids, Neanderthals, and then now, right? That we've been this way for 12,000 years, I think, right? 14, something like that. And I imagine that maybe when that happens again, our perspective might change collectively. I don't know. That's a complete guess, but dude, without war, it's like, well, who's going to profit? Pharmaceutical companies aren't going to win anywhere. The manufacturing companies of missiles and bullets aren't going anywhere. I feel as long as you have those, someone's going to drive violence.
Yeah.
Look at slavery. Until 5 generations ago, it was accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And now, good luck fighting anybody who thinks it's acceptable at any level, at least in the U.S., in the West, whatever, right? It's a heinous, horrific thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at, 200 years of human history versus the tens of thousands that were before that, our time without slavery has been this sliver, Are we going to get to a time without war? Hopefully, but that may be,
long after
like
us.
Kevin said, we'll need a lot of shifts.
Yeah.
I've always thought about that because
the Vikings enslaved dudes from Britain. When they were invading, they'd kidnap them and then they made them slaves. I mean,
that was some bad shit.
Yeah. So we're not even talking about just it being like a cultural, like it is culturally, a color thing, a cultural thing. Someone from another culture is immediately inferior to you, and you can use them however you want.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the old way of thinking for any culture. Maybe other than maybe the Native Americans, they may have been the most well put together culture there was because they knew how to deal with stress, PTSD, everything. They understood astronomy to a basic level, enough to know the cycles. I mean, that's one of the few cultures I can think of off the top of my head that was pretty well rounded, and they could be savages when they needed to be, warriors, right? Like. Yeah.
So we gave them smallpox infection.
Yeah, I was going to say. Then we came in and
gave them diabetes,
ruined it all.
Give them high cholesterol and fucking just fucked up a whole race of people. Like damn.
Well, shit, we should probably wrap this up.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize
it's almost 5. But thank you for coming on.
Thanks for listening to me.
It's fun. I keep telling Kevin this because. In the beginning, all the guests we were getting, I was finding people and inviting people. And then, the first one was Morgan. Mm-hmm. And Kevin's like, I got this friend from school. And I was like, all right, I don't know the guy. And he turned out to be awesome. And then so far, I think you're the third one that Kevin's brought in. Everybody's been awesome. So it's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I know cool people.
No, and that's the other thing is he'll tell me, he's told me a little bit about you. And I'm like, he sounds really interesting. And I'm always thinking in the back of my head, I hope this guy that Kevin thinks is so interesting doesn't come in and just a total dud. And you did not disappoint. So it was cool.
Well, Nagorno-Karabakh got me off on a tangent. But,
no, it's cool. I think it's cool to learn about things like what you were just talking about. I had no idea that's been going on ever.
Me and Jake on our very first podcast with Spencer, we talked about how what we all like, all three of us sitting down, how much we love history.
Yeah.
And it's like we just like that's why that was really cool because we were all talking about how much we like love talking about and learning history from somebody else when we're talking to them.
Yeah.
Because
And I like to learn about things that I have no idea about from somebody who knows what they're talking about. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I don't know if it even counts as history. It's like 2 weeks old.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
no, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. It's cool. So yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for giving up your Sunday afternoon.
This is what we do on Sundays.
Yeah.
I think, but I don't know if it's next week or coming up soon. We're going to be doing one with a guy who doesn't live here. So I got to figure out the whole Zoom thing and all that, which Kevin's going to have to help me with that. Cause I've actually, believe it or not, never done a Zoom call. Even with what's going on in the world right now. I've never done one. So I'm going to have to learn it.
Yeah. It's fun.
Well, cool.
It's pretty straightforward. I think the hardest part is recording.
Yeah. That's what we need to figure. I guess there's like a paid plan or version of Zoom where you can record, but there's other things you can attach to do it. The guy who we're doing it with sent me some link for recording it. I don't know. We're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
We always do. Yeah. This whole thing's been just play it by ear, learn as we go. A lot of YouTube.
Yeah.
Learning off YouTube University and doing the best we can. So, yeah. All right. Well, Justin, thank you.
Hey, thanks for your time, guys.